All right. You guys can hear me, right? All right. Perfect. Let's get started. So today we're going to talking about pricing. One quick disclaimer: most of my experience come from SaaS. Most of the thing we're going to talk about are also applicable to B2B. But most of my experience, because it's come from SaaS, so that's the primary context I take in general, talking about anything or designing anything. So first of all, who the hell I am to talk about pricing? I am not an economist. I'm not a data cruncher either. I started my career as a robotics engineer. Somehow ended up doing PhD. During the second year of PhD, one night we got drunk. And when we were wasted at 5 a.m. in the morning, we had a bet. A few weeks later, that bet turned into a startup. And a few months later, we had 10 employees and contracts with few Fortune 500 companies. Cannot manage the startup and the PhD at the same time, so I quit my PhD and my professor became my angel investor. That was the start of my entrepreneurial journey. Before that, never imagined that's the direction I'm going to go. Then 10, 15 years forward, I founded a few more companies. Some of them didn't really work out. The fastest one, or the biggest one, was 170-ish employees from 5 co-founders in like 18 months. During this time of my entrepreneurial career, my profile completely changed from being a robotics engineer to being a revenue engineer. So sales, marketing, pricing, revenue, and so on and so forth. Last exit in 2019, and since then, mostly what I'm doing is paying it forward by helping founders in the context of revenue growth, sales, marketing, and so on. So of course, I'm part of a lot of initiatives, both in Switzerland, Europe, Israel, and so on. Today, I'm here as a special coach at InnoSwiss. So quick question, who knows about InnoSwiss coaching? Wow, most of you, great. So just a quick intro for people who don't know. You might have heard about it takes a village to raise a child. Kind of the similar philosophy here, that to grow a startup, you need a lot more expertise and a skill set than a founder himself has, and that is beyond the cash and the money they have or they need. In InnoSwiss coaching program, it's a free program for the startups that provides a huge list of experts who are not only vetted, but they're domain experts, and they are happy to and willing to help. This program has 2 entry points and 3 stages. So one entry point is at the initial coaching, second entry point is at the scale-up coaching. Each stage of the program, you get certain vouchers that you can use to hire those people to do one-to-one coaching for you. Now, these experts ranges from being serial entrepreneurs to lawyers, from sales and marketing to experts in AI algorithms and anything in between. So there is a wide array that you can use. Now, as a founder, when I'm always get to know with the programs like this, the first thing I'm thinking is, yeah, that sounds interesting, but I have a million things to do. If I do this, I have to apply for it. I have to fill up the form. I have to understand the program. Maybe it will end up in a couple of calls because I don't understand the form. And then I get rejected. Really annoying and really waste of time, when time is one thing I don't have. And that's what's different about InnoSwiss coaching program. It's a fluke if you get rejected. So as long as you have something innovative, something science-related, it doesn't have to be hard sciences, it could be soft sciences, social sciences, anything. As long as there is some science involved and as long as there is some business case involved, chances are you will not get rejected. Coming back to pricing, so all of my startup had pricing, most of them not really good. And I always thought pricing is one of the biggest levers for growth and profitability and revenue generation, of course. The pricing is hard because it has multiple layers and multiple things that are pulling in different directions. So you want to make your sales easy. You want to have the best offer, but then you also want to maximize your revenue. You want to deliver the best service, but then you want to maximize your profitability. And then there is a whole other aspect of marketing and lead gen and packaging and how to show the pricing and how do you negotiate and so on and so forth. Now, in this talk, I'm not promising that I'm going to take that problem away, because that is a real tangible problem. My attempt in this talk would be to give you some tools that you can use to think about pricing a bit more organized, structured, and strategic fashion. And one of the things which get complex with pricing also is as you grow with time, the new features adds, the new market segments you target, and the new kind of customers you get with the different ROI and so on and so forth, that gets very complex. So these tools should also help you manage the pricing strategy as you go from one stage to the other. For that, I introduce you to Offer Engineering Canvas. So this is kind of gives you the bigger picture and helps you fit all the pieces. In the beginning, if you're a one customer startup, you might not have information to put in all, but as you grow, you get to put in all, and at the same time, single view, you see if everything fits together or not. Rest of the talk, I'm going to talk about how to work on the canvas and how to use it strategically. And for that, I'm going to use an example, which is trains. Now, train is not very high-tech product, but it was back in 1850s. It was the very high-tech product back then. And at the same time, it still has parallels with other high-tech companies we have today. So they have to be profitable, you have to make money. You have many different kind of customer segments. You need capital investment in the beginning, so you can build the product and then sell it. You also, if you take the example of more subscription type SaaS kind of businesses, once you build the infrastructure, the cost of serving one additional customer is practically zero. Also the case with trains. So if we start with the train example and we want to start filling up this canvas, the first thing we start with is capability. So the capability of a train is going from point A to B. Now, fastest is the USB, which was in 1850s. The second thing we talk about is, then the second layer is fencing. So fencing is, put it this way, we group customers and create a customer segment. Here we are grouping customer segments to create fencing. Fencing, so many of the startups might not have that kind of different grouping, but sometimes it's just good to take a minute and think about it if you have completely isolated group of customers, because you do not want to merge them together in the rest of the pricing strategy. So here a good example is passenger and freights. So they have to be very clear, they have to be unjumpable, and they have to be fair enough that if I put my pricing for passengers and freight, it's still fair. And I'm using completely different ways and different pricing for both of them. Small, big, and large is not fencing. Clinics and hospitals is not fencing. They still come later in the customer segment. But cardiologist and dentist, that's where we can talk about fencing, and they can come here. The second is packaging. Now, this is one of the most complicated part of pricing. So, of course, it has one is the package itself, and then add-ons on top of the packages. Now, one of the things which happens when we talk about packaging, or when we think about packaging, is by default we go to silver, gold, and platinum. Good, better, best, right? And sometimes you have to do it. There is no way around it. But we shouldn't take that as a default. That's what I argue. We should first focus on jobs to be done, and if nothing works out, we go back to good, better, best. Now, trains, of course, take that from from the cruise liners back then. They just copy-pasted the model, and they struggled with it. I'm going to talk about it in just a second. But jobs to be done, let me give you a complex example, just to give you an idea what do I mean by good, better, best versus jobs to be done. So let's take a scenario of a quality management tool. Now, quality management tool do three things. It detects, it diagnoses, and then it predicts or suggests what to do. In an enterprise client, there are three departments. All three have to use the quality management tool. So let's say we create a good, better, best model. So pay less, it only detects. Pay a bit more, it detects and diagnoses. Pay a lot, detects, diagnoses, and predict, and suggest to you the solutions. OK, now it's a very complex sale, because you have to get the three departments agree at the same time to buy and implement your product. Now, what if one department says, you know what, I just need to detect. Another department says, well, we need to detect and diagnose. We do a little bit predictability. We don't want a lot of predictability. We don't want the full feature. We just want limited set of that feature. And third department has its own story. Now it becomes even more complex sales. A lot of negotiations, a lot of discussions, and a very long sales cycle. So the default strategy is let's create a 3x3 matrix. Every department can choose whatever they want. It solves the first problem, but now it's created another problem. In sales again, too much discussions is still happening. Each department is looking at what other department is buying or not. Why does the other department has funds to buy the whole package and I only have for detect? What if we focus on jobs to be done? If we focus on job to be done, we say, OK, department A, what do they really need to get it done? We create a package for department A. Department B, what do they exactly need to get it done? We create a custom package for department B. So now we have three packages, one for each department, which means the number of decisions are, not only the number of decisions comes down, but also I can sell to different departments one at a time. Whoever departments I can sell first, I'll sell, and then the rest of two departments, I'll upsell. So just by changing the pricing strategy, I changed my sales strategy and reduced my sales cycle. So that's kind of what I meant by let's think first about jobs to be done, and if that has no benefit or it doesn't work out, then we go back to good, better, and best. Now, the train implemented the good, better, and best. I have to give you a bit of a context to that story. So one of the things which happens when you do good, better, and best is you start to suddenly feel two forces pulling you in very different direction. There is one set of customers which says, it's too expensive. That's what we call visible loss. But then there's other set of customers who say, your product is not good enough. We need more features. But they will never say it's too cheap. That's what we call invisible loss. So obviously, like every startup, train company started with an undifferentiated ticket, the second class, the basic coach they have. And then they had the same problem. So they created first class. In their case, at least, the first class was booked, everybody was happy, and that's fine. But then when they introduced third class, everybody was in third class. First class was full, third class was full, second class was empty. So to give a background story, it's around 1900s when, so 1850 to 1900, in US, they were building tracks between Philadelphia and New York and so on and so forth, short ones. Around 1900, the East Coast was getting overpopulated. So government wanted to move the people to the West Coast. To that extent, they were giving away free land if you move there. The default option is you go, take a caravan, horses, ponies, whatever you get, and you get there. It takes 6 months to go from New York to Sacramento. And it costs several $1,000s without adjusting for inflation. So basically, all your life savings. And around 20% people die on the way because of robbers, diseases, and so on and so forth. So now the train comes in. Takes 6 days, costs $6, and nobody dies. And even then, people are complaining it's too expensive. Huh? OK, so now when they introduced the third class, the people who could pay for the second class, they were like, it's about 6 days. Doesn't make much of a difference. It's OK if they don't have cushions, I'll bring pillows. I'll save money, which I would need when I reach California. So why would I pay for second class? And that's the conundrum, where your lower price package eats up your profit margins because the people who could pay, they still don't want to pay. So they experimented a lot. They removed the windows, they cramped a lot of people, they reduced the number of tickets, nothing budged. People just say, OK, it's full, I'll take tomorrow. What's the problem? I'm not that much in a hurry. I'm going 6 days instead of 6 months, so that's fine. The invention or the innovation that they come up with, it was as genius as it was brutal. They removed the roof in the third class. Now all 3 classes were full. But here's the thing. Removing the roof sounds like, hey, just remove the roof. It's cool. It's cabrio, you know? It's fun. We can do party and go. Until you realize that the train goes through Kentucky mountains. Huge temperature change and really, really cold for a day. What is the side effect of that? 10 to 20% people die in the third class. So they kind of reintroduce the feature of death. In order to fill up the 3 classes. And now the people who could pay has enough incentive to pay for the second class. And that's kind of the lesson here. Now, morals and ethics might be better in 2024, but the basic intuition and the principle is kind of the same, that if you're creating good, better, best, be really careful about that might eat up your margins, and people might not want to pay. So you have to have a very thought-out plan in which there is a certain population of people or a certain group of companies that they can pay, they have enough incentive to pay for. Moving forward. So the next step is pricing models. So I am usually against having flat fee. It should be always per something, and it kind of creates a multi-dimensional revenue stream. So on one side, you can buy good, better, and best, or whatever fits you. And then on the other side, within the each channel, you have another one which somebody who gets more value out of it, or they use more, they pay more. Now the question is, how do we come up with the variable that we charge? We could charge users, we could charge gigabytes, we could charge, a lot of different things. So first thing, of course, it has to be measurable and executable. Otherwise, that metric makes no sense. But then the easiest way to think about it is in terms of value chain. So take an example of a software company that can build and deploy AI models. So the value chain is I create an AI model. I can charge users. The second step is I gather data and train my model, gigabytes or processing power, something like that. Deploy my models, a number of models I can charge for, and the model works and improve my KPIs, so data outputs or KPI improvements I can charge for, right? The question is, how do we choose one? There are no good answers. There are trade-offs. The good thing about if we choose towards the beginning of the value chain is, it's whatever we choose is applicable across verticals. So we don't have to think too much about what verticals, what customer segments, what use cases, and so on and so forth. The bad thing is, customers see that as a cost. They don't see it as a ROI. And in order to explain the ROI, that's another sales effort you have to put in, right? The more middle you go, they start to merge the benefits and drawbacks of the both sides, but then they get harder to explain in sales. So how do I do cost estimate when I'm not charging on, when I'm charging on processing power in an AI model deployment, right? So and the good thing about the charging towards the end is the value is very clear. So the customer sees that value. Most of the time, you can actually charge per much higher unit cost. The problem is it works in specific verticals and use cases. So you have to do a bit more homework and think and say, OK, for this use case or this segment, this can be a variable. And for other segment, we have to choose another variable or mix somehow. The tricky part is when you choose a variable and people don't want to pay for that variable. So that's a plumber problem. So let's say your sink is leaking. You call a plumber comes in with a car. He parks a car next to your apartment. He's super happy. I found the parking spot next to you. He comes in, and he sees you have a very expensive carpet. So he says, hey, listen, I can take my shoes off if you want, because I see you have a very nice carpet. And you say, wow, great, yeah, thank you. Please do that. He goes in, he fixes, and then he gives you an invoice. Now, invoice has 3 line items. One is time and material, one is the parking fee, and one is the shoe taking off fee. So if we map that on the graph of willingness to pay versus value to customer, first line item, it's a no-brainer. High value, high expectation, clear. Parking, 0 value. But hey, you know what? He paid whatever. I reimburse him. It's fair. I don't have a free parking in my apartment. It's my fault. It's fine. The shoe taking one. Well, it doesn't take him time. It doesn't cost him any money. I never paid for it. And now he's charging me. So look, you might still give the money because it's not worth arguing over $5. But that's going to annoy the shit out of you. And you will think 3 times before calling the same guy. Right? So we can choose a metrics, but we have to be careful about the decision maker's willingness to pay and the value. Now, it gets really complex when you're selling to a committee, because each committee member can have a different graph of their own. And it's come from many different reasons, right? It could be coming from what's fair and what's not. It could come from I'm used to or not. It could come from it could come from whatever reasons. Many different reasons it's come from. But at the end of the day, we should be just careful about when we pick a metric. Then we comes down to price points. Now, price points is there are different ways to reach a price point. I mean, we can do cost plus, we can do competitor-based. I'm usually advocate of value-based, at least to start with. And if it has to be go down or up because of the competitor or cost, so be it. But at least start with the value-based. And if we do the value-based, first we have to talk about ROI metric. Now, ROI metric is a very special variable because it connects everything. Because you can only provide ROI on top of what they're already doing or what is out there they could be using. So by definition, it's connected to your competitors. You also know that if you can increase your ROI metric in your product, you can do a lot of things. You can increase your pricing, it makes your sales easier, and so on and so forth, which means it's directly correlated to your product backlog. It's obviously related to pricing strategy because, like, hey, if my ROI metric is high, I can do high pricing with a value-based pricing. So the price points I can define with that. But it's also connected to sales and marketing strategy, and I'll tell you how. So when we talk about sales and marketing strategy, for example, freemium is not a pricing strategy, it's a marketing strategy. We all know that. But in order to make a freemium successful, we have to think about, okay, if the free people is going to join, what success would they get so it gets easier for them to convert to premium? So now we have to take an ROI metric, divide it, and split it into 2 parts. One part is free and one part is not. It's very hard to do freemium without understanding that there has to be a success point a user has to get when they're using for free. But then, how do you convert user from free to premium? let's say we talk B2B, so we give them a call. When do you give them a call? Every day? Every week? No, but we give them a call when they achieve their ROI metric. How do we know that? So then we have to define something, data collection in our product to say, hey, this guy just did that. So give him a call. He's ready to be converted. And so on and so forth. So this is just some example. This is a kind of a very unlimited list of what we want to do with reference to sales strategy. But it's the connection between the price strategy we just developed, and then how do we display the pricing, the display of the pricing, how do we create the packages out of it? Is it 1 to 8 users package? Is it razor and blade model? Is it freemium? How do we show the pricing that we have? It's very hard to say it's $1 per GB processed, right? So if you have to create the packages in order to maximize the revenue. So how do we do that, and how does it help us in the primary goal, which is also to sell more and faster and not endlessly creating longer sales cycles, which then should connect it to a growth strategy. So like, okay, we have a freemium pricing. Okay, fine, we can sell, but is it connected to anything that is going to give us growth? So for example, if I'm building AI models, the free users give us data, our AI models get better. That is now connected with our growth strategy. Land and expand. So we, in our sales strategy, we are only showing one package, cheaper one. We know it produces enough ROI. We know it's faster to sell. If we present more packages, it creates more discussion. So we do land and expand. We just show one option. Whoever buys, then we show them other more expensive options. And also selling solution to selling product. That's important for the early stage ones out there. So that's kind of creates the full map. And now when you, as I said before, like when you start, let's say you're a completely very early stage company, you might have only one item in fencing, one item in packaging, and 0 add-ons, one modeling, one price point. But then the customer asks you, say, hey, can you also do that for us? So of course, you're going to create a custom code. But the minute you do that, it goes in an add-on field for the future reference. So at the end of the day, once you start thinking like this and you start mapping, it kind of becomes a very visual map where all things are not only there, but they're connected. And then you can detect or debug where they don't connect. And at the same time, as the company market segments involve, you can add things there. But you also know that if you add a completely new fenced customer segment or grouping, you have to do rest of the stuff again. If you add a new capability, you might want to have a new canvas. So it gives you that clarity that what you need to change and what you don't. But at the same time, you can keep the same thing and keep on experimenting on sales strategy without changing anything. And that could be even faster experiments. Like, hey, our price point is the same, so our revenue technically per customer is the same. Let's see if we can do something at the sales strategy part or the growth strategy part, and that connects the dot much better than anything else. So that's it, folks. Now let's see if it made any sense or it was complete gibberish. Does it make sense? Was it useful, practically, compared to what we do normally? Questions? I'm really good. It was that clear. Yeah.
So, at the end, you have.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much. At the end of the day, you need to find a price that you put there. So it's whatever, $100, $150, $200. And often it's then you get some people, they pay that and others not. And how do you think, like, what do you think about A/B testing prices, different pricings? What do you think about that?
Yes, what's not here is price testing strategy. Just to make sure I don't make it overcomplicated. But no, there is a whole other domain of price testing. This is more about how to conceptually think and design and evolve. Now, every time you have this, there is a whole other strategy which is purely about testing, like how does it make sense? Any of this is right. So for example, what I was talking about, right? So the expectation, once you choose a metric, then expectations paid versus value, right? That's, okay, we can have assumptions, but it needs to get tested. So that comes under the testing strategy part. So we can talk about it in more detail, but there is another dimension to it. That's what I'm trying to say.
You mentioned before that you start figuring out the price point based on the value you provide. But how can you measure like how much value there is? Like, because maybe you don't see internally into the client's kind of balance sheet, so you don't really know how much time he saved or how much more he sold. Like, how do you figure out the value?
To some extent, so one thing is sometimes there is measurable value that we have access to, data. Sometimes there is measurable value that we don't have access to, data. And sometimes the measurement itself is hard. But in all three cases, ultimately, what is more important than data is perception when it comes to sale, right? So if I think your product saves me 100,000 a year, your product saves me 100,000 a year, period. Right? So when you don't have access to the data, it's kind of comes again in the testing and validation strategy. But ultimately what you're doing is you're creating scenarios and you're testing with your customer on the problem level. So you don't even talk about pricing in that testing. You say, okay, this is the problem. How does it happen? What is the road blocking points? Here is the calculation I have done based on that. Does it make sense? Am I missing something to add into it? Do you have other problems that doesn't cover in this calculation? So people are really bad at telling, or sometimes don't, and sometimes they're really bad at connecting the dots. They will not tell you that pricing is low. So the only thing you can do is don't talk about pricing. Talk about the cost of the problem. And that's where people are much more open, generally speaking, to talk about like, yeah, it's a problem. And this is annoying, and then the guy comes in, and the guy comes out, and then I lose 2 hours, and then I have to wake up in the middle of the night, and I miss my kids' 3 soccer plays at the school. And sometimes you just put a dollar value. So what is the value of missing your kids' soccer play at the school? That's immeasurable. So there is always this also the factor that whenever you do like proper calculations, some things will just be immeasurable. They're just annoying and things like that. And sometimes you add a dollar value to it and do your calculations. Sometimes you say, okay, I can already provide 5x or 3x on the measurable stuff. So let me just add that as an unmeasurable stuff as my value proposition and in sales. But hardcore values is still 3x, so technically my value is more than 3x. So just one line to finish. Actually, there was a very interesting case. So there is a startup that I'm working with. Can you pass the mic along to the back? They basically replacing the servers artists have for rendering animations and high-resolution photos and so on with the cloud. One of the good things is nobody wants to have a server. And once you realize that, you say, okay, my price is exactly what the price is to buy, maintain, and replace servers. Every additional benefit is immaterial. It's the process benefits and so on and so forth. It's hard to measure, fine. But then because I'm replacing one cost to the other, I don't have to go in ROI calculations. So then the ROI metric there becomes very becomes very fuzzy because just the process metrics in the beginning, and then when you have data, you can analyze it more.
Yes, so very interesting this canvas. I was wondering, because you mentioned the train example, but also like SaaS example, would that also apply to examples where the variable costs per customers are quite high? Could you also use something like that?
So variable cost of serving a customer is very high. Yes, I mean, where do you see the mismatch when the variable cost is high in the canvas? I use the example and I mentioned that in train, just like in SaaS, but I also specify that that is a SaaS-related example. If I'm selling a medical testing device which has consumables, then the cost of having a customer and providing that consumables is high as well. But overall, it doesn't change anything here, right? Or does it? Am I missing something?
I guess in price points, right? Like, I mean, because you have to factor in also to your fixed cost, your variable cost per customer, that then are stretched over different numbers of.
So one of the things I always say is that, like at the end of the day, we don't talk about cost when we're designing pricing strategy. The reason is we want to charge maximum we can. That's a default. So if we create a pricing strategy that is validated and it can charge maximum, and that's the maximum cap, and we test it out, that's the maximum cap, but our cost is higher than that, then the business is simply not viable. It has nothing to do with pricing strategy or cost structure, right? Otherwise, yeah, so that's why we don't take the cost in the pricing structure itself. It's a business viability matrix. Otherwise, I was only comparing the trains with SaaS. I was not talking about it specifically here.
Thank you.
There is.
Thank you. Very interesting because you're like really talking about what keeps me awake at the moment. Maybe
tonight is a good sleep.
Well, no, I think.
Damn it!
This
talk was a complete failure.
You explained the problem. You haven't provided the solution. I think that's what I probably need to do myself. So maybe the question is too specific, but we have developed a software which helps to, let's say, migrate from big system A to big system B. If you go to a B2B strategy, then, well, on an SAP implementation project, that will cost 5, 6, 7, 8 million easily. I can easily charge 50, 60,000 for a period of a year to one client for one B2B client. Same time, I can also sell it to project managers directly in a B2C model, SaaS software. If I do both, I can never ask the B2B client to pay, let's say, a very premium price because they go to the website and they say, yeah, well, why the hell should we pay that? And so there's a bit your third class.
The question is, can we put them in fencing somehow? Can we take an angle and put them in fencing? Then we can display both prices. And
yeah, so fine. I was thinking along your fencing lines, but transparency is my enemy in this case.
Not if you put them in fencing. Then transparency doesn't matter. Because if you see the passenger rate and the freight rate, you don't care. Either you're a passenger or you're a freight. And if you're charging differently for a freight with completely different metrics and everything, you don't care.
Okay, thank you. I need to map it into services. Thank you.
For others, it was completely clear or completely useless? So, completely useless. We still have a few minutes. If you want to talk about, comment, suggestions to improve this. Or point out something bad about it.
How would it differentiate if you look at the B2C case? Like what specifics would you kind of approach differently than what
ROI metric. Sure, thank you.
Yeah, if you could explain, like, how would we approach a B2C pricing strategy in compared to the explanation you gave for B2B, that would be nice.
I took the B2C example to start with. Trains. What it changes is the ROI metric. That's the problem in most B2C products. Because in B2B, people pay more for what they need. In B2C, people pay more for what they want. How much you spend on broccoli versus apple, kind of debate. So that's where the ROI is very tricky in most B2C cases. But ROI is completely legit and very important topic to discuss in B2B cases.
Can you make an example of such a ROI for a customer? Like, is this the return the customer gets using your product, or what is it?
So in business discussion, right, at the end of the day, CFO or so if you're a VP of sale and you want to change a CRM, you will always think about like, okay, I'm paying $100 per month per user for this CRM. If I'm changing it to $200, how does it affect my bottom line? How does it affect my sales guy performance? Can they handle more lead? Can they handle less leads, and so on and so forth, right? So there is an ROI calculation by default. You do okay. If you're NGO in Geneva and you're buying a new chandelier for $1 million, no. But in most tangible startup high tech kind of cases, there is a background of ROI calculation. But at the same time, when you pick most of the B2C products, whether it's paying for an app or paying for a chocolate, there is no ROI calculation. It's mostly intuition. So how much would you want to pay for a to-do planner for yourself? How do you do actually ROI calculation when you say, oh, we have these 3 apps, one is $10, $20, $30? You don't. You just say, well, I like this one, it's easy, it's UX better, and I can pay $30. That's kind of is the decision-making process. Not in all cases, but in most. The more expensive you go in B2C, the less ROI calculation you do. That's also very weird.
That also mean that then the whole marketing strategy is just much more important because you have to
Yes.
emotionally just prove that it's not ROI but actually
Yes.
just emotion makes
Yes. In B2B, you can sell, you can be an engineer, you can sell on pure logic. In B2C, try that. Try to explain the logic of paying $20 for a to-do list. Like sometimes it works, but on an average, which bag she should buy.
Exactly. I was coming there.
Now explain the logic. That, hey, this is $25 bag. It looks the same. It has better quality than this Gucci bag that costs $2,500. Explain the logic. That's kind of what I meant. The more expensive you go, the more illogical it becomes. You were saying something.
It's a divorce case.
So you know, like for example, you buy a bespoke suit, cost you $5,000. How is that ROI related? Unless you buy for business and you say, hey, we're bespoke business, I increase my conversion. I'm a sales guy and I can increase my conversion rate or I can increase my pricing by 10%. Now that's a business case, but then you're buying the suit for business, not for going to a wedding.
Maybe just because you're here, looking,
I guess.
looking at like go-to-market, like when the startup is really fresh and looking at the market, like how to approach the market. Sometimes you want to kind of lower the friction by giving discounts or promotional aspects and stuff. Can you kind of lead us through a bit, like what are the pitfalls in giving discounts and how to avoid that the customer perceives your service for less value than you actually want to sell, but you want to just get traction into the client
So
board? So
even for early stage startup, there are like 2 or 3 levels. One level is I'm acquiring my first customer. I don't give a shit what you pay me. It's my first customer. I need to collect data. As simple as that. And I need to have one customer, so my company goes from being a project to being a company. The second stage is around 10-ish customers, and then if you're negotiating every deal, well, you should sit down and think about your pricing strategy and segments. It's nothing to do with pricing strategy, just 10 customers belong to 10 completely different segments, and they calculate in their head completely different, but you never asked and you never think about it, or they never told you. Then the third scenario is when you start to have 30, 40 customers, and your segment is kind of clear, you kind of have understanding, but you still, so one way to do that is, okay, let me do my pricing strategy better and so on. Or I'm in a negotiation culture. Or some other factor is influencing where we just have to negotiate. And that's, in most of the negotiation cases for early stage startups, the general thing I say is that do not give discounts. Give value for an exchange. So give value for an exchange is I can have a list of a lot of things you can do for me that are easy for you or almost free for you, but very valuable for me. So I can use it, hey, but 20K per month doesn't make sense. 15K is the maximum we can go for. One thing is I need to understand whether I understand now or I understand after the sale. Why 15K and why not 13K? And why not 17K? So that's one other thing. But at the same time, say, listen, sure. So one thing is, can we close this month? Second thing is, sure, can we do a press release together? Because you have a PR department that can pick up a call and get our press release in Financial Times tomorrow. For me, it will take a 6 months exercise when I'm spending half a day every day. But that press release is kind of valuable. I can use that as my marketing asset, or even lead gen asset, or in my sales presentation asset. Depends on what kind of business and what kind of clients I'm in. So generally, I suggest that early stage startups should anyway have a list of things that their customers can do for them, which is free or easy for them, but it's very valuable. So anytime a customer opens his mouth and says, "Hi, can we do this?" Sure. Pick one of these things. Anything else because I'm here? I'm still here.
Yeah, like in the past, I heard sometimes that, like, if you have different packages, let's say there's one group, so there's no fencing. We have like 3 packages. Let's leave the add-ons aside. That you consider like a certain psychology about pricing. That you, for example, make, let's say, the best package double the price than the mid-tier to lead people more into the mid-tier.
Yeah, that comes in the marketing strategy. The most famous documented case is from Economist. So they had 3 pricing. I think it was like $15 for digital only, $25 for digital and print, and $25 for print only. And it was very well experimented. When they have only 2 offers, 15 and 25 for both, and 15 for digital, there was a number like more than 50%, like 60-70% people were buying digital only. When they added this third option, which is print only $25, 60 people were buying the $25 print and digital. I don't remember the exact numbers, but there was a big switch. But that comes on the pricing, the marketing strategy. That's why I put the marketing strategy in pricing, because it's very directly related.
Can you, with your pricing strategy, also implement certain incentivation for growth loops within the product, like that you motivate people to invite others and have a pricing advantage, or do you have any lever towards kind of growth?
I mean, we do referral things all the time. They work a bit more, their work is a bit much simpler in B2C. B2B is a bit more complicated because who gets the money and who refers? Company gets the money and I refer? Why would I do that? I would do it for you as human to human. I'd not do it for the company's commission, right? But at the same time, there is a whole strategy about network effect. So the more people use it, the more valuable it becomes. That's where the referrals kick in. So there will be, of course, some segment of users who will say, well, when you have a network, call me. But then the others who are more desperate to use your product or to solve the problem that your product is solving, then those people will be like, okay, let's bring in. And then there is a whole other aspect. I mean, I had sales conversation where the CMO of one Fortune 500 company recommended me to the marketing department of another Fortune 500 company because he was looking for a job. That I figured out much later. But that was his way of connecting that, hey, this is a great product, you should use it, and definitely we should talk. Yeah, it's very hard to make a strategy out of it, but as I said, these things are just few examples. The list of what we can do is very long, from psychological to materialistic to the design of the page and so on and so forth. But then it again really matters how your sales happen. Does it happen on the web page? Does it happen on meetings? Does it happen in casino? Does it happen on a call where you're exactly presenting the price? And then there is a whole other strategy where you say, okay, we always have this much information about enough information about a customer, so the package is always custom, but then the way we define the package is based on the core pricing strategy. So that's another way to manage your sales team when they're creating custom packages for everybody, because there is a core calculations at the back. So that's also a sales and marketing strategy. All right, if nothing else,